I'll come off the video. So we are actually in Daf of Daled Omid Aleph on that next Mishnah. You may want to put people on mute, but by all means come off mute if you need to, which is fine. We're in the Mishnah at the base of Chof Daled Omid Aleph. It was still into, if you remember, Kiddush HaChidush, which means people coming, giving their testimony that they saw the new moon. Chof Daled Omid Aleph, right at the end there, the last Mishnah of the page. Very interesting. Dumus Surais Lavona Hoyoy Lo Rabban Gamliel. This was good. How are you going to test the Eidim? And let's not assume that they're trying to fool the Bezdin. Of course, we've had examples of that too. But they may have made a mistake, as we said before, especially as sunset round here, beautiful sunsets, as we know. In Israel, you sometimes do have a formation, a cloud formation. It could look a little bit like a cloud. Well, it looks like the moon. And therefore, what they would do, it's wonderful, they would have Dumus Tsuros Lavona on a tableau over Koisel Ba'aliyosa. Upstairs, Rabban Gamliel would have like a luach, I suppose, either a table, or it could be on the wall, as we said in the tableau over Koisel. Some people said he had like it was like a blackboard. On the wall, could be part of it on the table, just really, and he would then check with the Eidim and said, 1 minute, what did you see? Did you see the moon looking like this, like this? He would have it on the wall as well. He said, imagine you were looking out. Did you see it? Which shape was it? Which side? Remember the various Mishnahs with the Mishnah we saw before? Was the visible side on the right-hand side, the left-hand side? How wide was it? How high? So they would then be tested and to see whether they really did actually see the moon. Again, we've said before, of course, these Dayanim were experts in astronomy too, and they knew exactly what it should look like and how high it should be. Imagine if it's around the wall, they could have actually said, which direction was it? Shebohen, with them, with these churos, with these formations of, lunar formations, Mare Esahediotus, he would show the common man, the man in the street, also may not be able to describe it well enough, exactly the shape, it may be hard to say the description of it. What did you see? Did you see the moon looking like this, looking like that? There, as I say, there were various forms of moon, and he presumably pointing to them and saying, which one did you see? Not quite the same as, selecting people at the police station. Was the man ABC, but perhaps more positively, we pointing to the moon and saying, was it shaped like this, which way round, and I say how wide, how high, all these things he would be showing them, and that was in like perhaps a blackboard, or maybe not. Well, that's something we'll have to look into. What were we when it says Dumus Tsuros Lavona? Does it mean it was two-dimensional? Was it three-dimensional? So that's something we'll have to look into. But certainly there were forms of the moon in different shapes and sizes, so he could check and test the witnesses. Okay, says the Gemara, just 1 minute. Says the Gemara 4 lines up.
If you had it on a tablet, on the wall, presumably it was in 2D, not in. He wasn't handing. He didn't have.
Yeah, absolutely. But the first one, when he says he had it, the tableau uber koisel.
Well, I mean, the tablet.
It depends how you learn. It depends on the tech. You're quite. We'll pick this up in due course, not tonight. Later on in the Gemara, there were two things going on here. One, the tableau, which means it might have been actually on on the table almost, and on the wall too to get the effect. Or you're quite right, Mervyn, maybe it was, there is a text that actually reads, al tablo b'koisel, some type of table on the wall. Imagine you've got one of these charts. We've seen all those charts going back to the days of doing our chemistry. When you've got the charts and you know that's a table. There was like a table on the wall where you'd have all these things. So you're quite right, Mervyn. It sounds like it was
because we see it in 2D as well. We don't see it in 3D. The picture,
no, we don't. No, we don't. Yeah,
picture we get of the moon.
It would seem it should be two-dimensional, but the Gemara, I'll say we'll discuss that eventually. Okay, so let's assume, as Mervyn said, and it seems like the standard way to understand this would have been it was two-dimensional. Are you allowed to do that? A new halacha coming out. But it will take a couple of weeks, I'm afraid, to get through to all of this. So we'll have to stop in the middle of this subject. But let's start off and we'll see how this develops. Umi shori, is it permitted to draw the moon? Can you do that? The moon, the sun, you would have thought, why ever not? But let's follow this through. V'ho kasiv. It says, well, kasiv means it's written, or some people change this for Tanya. We've got a brisa. The pasuk says, Lo sa'asun iti. People familiar with that pasuk? You should have it around the side of your Gemara. I'm sure you do. Lo sa'asun iti. Do you remember this pasuk comes up at the end of Parshas Yisro, where the pasuk says, Lo sa'asun iti, don't make gods of silver, gods of gold. But it's very interesting. There are two verbs in that pasuk. And also those people familiar with the Naginus, is actually an esnachta, which means a half a stop under the word iti. Lo sa'asun iti. So it's as if there's a stop there. And then it says, gods of silver, gods of gold, don't make for yourselves. It looks like we're learning from here two separate points. Don't make golden images, silver images, but also lo sa'asun iti. What does that mean? Don't make iti. What's iti? Well, iti normally means with me. What do you mean don't make with me? Says the Gemara, especially, as I say, you've got the Naginus making a half a stop after those first three words. Don't make iti. Have a look at the Gemara, please. 3 lines up. Lo sa'asun kidmus shamoshai. That's what it means. Don't make things which resemble shamoshai, my ministers, if you like, that are with me in heaven. Sun, the moon, etc. Have a look at Rashi. Lo sa'asun iti. Tsuros forms ha'oindim iti, that are with me in heaven. You look up to heaven, you've got they're ministering to God in their wonderful beauty. Whether you talk about the sun, the moon, the stars, etc. It sounds like from this, lo sa'asun iti, don't make those things which are, if you like, with me in heaven, in Shamayim, and they act as my ministers, they're ministering to me. You're not allowed to do that. Lo sa'asun, 3 lines up, kidmus shamoshai. That's the way you'd learn that. Lo sa'asun iti. Don't make those things, those items that are with me, ministering to me. Or about, no, you learned wrong shot in that pasuk, in that limud, that lesson that we're learning from that pasuk. Lo osra Torah ela shamoshin she'efsha lasos kamoison. Don't make things which minister to me where you could have made them ministering to me. Don't make them yourselves for your own purposes. That's what it means. Don't make, now clearly you can't make a sun and a moon. You can have a form of it, a picture of it, a diagram, a painting of it. That's not what this means. It means don't make things which you would have made as a minister to me. My Shekhinah, I would have resided maybe in this particular area. We'll see in a moment. Those things you would have made for me, if you like, when you say for me, that you could worship in a place like that. We'll see in a moment. Those things you shouldn't be making for yourself. And clearly, therefore, sun and the moon, that's out. You cannot make a sun or a moon, but you can make other items, as we'll see, continues the Gemara, Kidesanya. We've got a brisa. Lo yaseh odom bayis tavnis heichal. You've got the Beis Hamikdash. Don't make, and there are other rushes elsewhere in the Gemara that explains, don't make a Beis Hamikdash or a Mishkan, which you would have been making for me, for my purpose, a Shekhinah residing there. Don't make something of the same dimensions for your own purposes. That's what it means. Lo sasun, don't make those things which are normally made for my purposes. If you like to honor God, whether you're talking about the Beis Hamikdash, don't make things like that, as I say, the same dimensions for your own purposes. So, as we say, a bayis, you make a house, which look exactly the same dimensions of the Heichal, which means a Beis Hamikdash structure. Achsadra, that's a portico, which looks like a tavnis for the ulam. There was the hall, the chamber that went towards the Heichal, the actual building of the Beis Hamikdash. Don't make it's got like 3 walls to it. Don't make a ulam, a hallway, which resembles exactly what it was like in the Beis Hamikdash. You cannot do the same. That's what it means. Another example, a chotze keneged azora. Don't make a courtyard the same dimensions that would have been in the Beis Hamikdash, looking the same. Or the shulchan. We've seen pictures of the shulchan, the table, with remember the loaves of bread on it in the Mishkan, in the Beis Hamikdash. Don't make something similar dimensions for your own purposes. Or, this is the one we can be familiar with, menorah keneged menorah. Don't make a menorah which you would have been making for my purposes. In other words, it would have resided in the Beis Hamikdash. Don't make a menorah looking exactly the same dimensions. So if it's larger or smaller, that would be okay. Or if it doesn't exactly resemble the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash. What does that mean? Have a look at the Gemara. Menorah keneged menorah. You cannot make a menorah keneged corresponding to the menorah that they had in the Beis Hamikdash, which means you can do the following. Last 2 words of the Omid. Avol oiseh, as we turn the page, or you look to the next sheet. But you can make shel chamisha, v'shel shisha, v'shel shmoine. What does that mean? You cannot make a menorah which resembles the menorah of the Beis Hamikdash. What happens if it doesn't resemble? How many branches were in the Beis Hamikdash? Now let's not get confused with Hanukkah. How many branches did the menorah have in the Beis Hamikdash? 7. As mentioned in the Pasuk, Tetzaveh, or Teruma actually. Tetzaveh is more about the Kohen God, the Kohanim, the clothes that the Kohanim wore. But Truma talks about the size, and it talks about the makeup of the various items in the Beis Hamikdash, in the Mishkan, and it actually had 7 branches. You cannot make with 7 branches at the same size. Larger or smaller would be okay, but also if you don't have 7 branches, for example, you had 5, 6, or 8. And Rashi says, interesting, Shel Chamishon Neiros, candles. V'shel Shishon Neiros, that's interesting. Rashi is adding something further. He's saying, even if you had 7 branches, but you, in the top of the branches, only 5 or 6 actually had, the containers, the Neiros, seems to me that would also be okay. Interesting, this Gemara comes up elsewhere, Gemara in Avodah Zorah, and there Rashi actually does talk about the branches, 5 branches, 6 branches. Clearly, Shmoineh does mean 8 branches. So even if you did the same size as that in the Beis HaMikdash, looking for Hanukkah purposes, that would be fine with 8 branches. Okay? So that answers our question. You're only not allowed to make items which you could have made for holy purposes, humanly possible to make them. Those items you mustn't make. But you can have diagrams according to this of the sun and the moon, as Rabban Gamliel had in his upstairs attic when he was testing the people. Says Gemara just continues on this same theme, just to clarify a little bit more. The Shel Shiva, even of 7, is the end of this brisa that started on the previous Amud. Even if it was 7 branched, lo yaseh afilu shel sham minei matchos. Oh, you would have said, what about if you made it out of copper, not gold? Now we know in the Beis HaMikdash it was gold. The Gemara says you actually cannot make a 7-branch menorah out of a different metal. Why? Have a look at Rashi. Afilu shel sham minei matchos, even made of other metals rather than gold. Why? Lefi, because shekayotze bo, in the second line of Rashi, similar to them, kashero lifnim. It is actually kosher inside the Beis HaMikdash. You would be yotze if you had a menorah. Of course, we normally talk about the gold menorah. In fact, doesn't the pasuk say a gold menorah? Says the Gemara, there's a brisa. We've got a Gemara in Menachos, and the Gemara in Menachos says the following. One of the rules that we know of, remember Rabbi Yishmael, maybe Shloishes Midos. There are 13 ways of learning psukim in the Torah, rules. What are the 13 rules? Now the pasuk here says, "V'osisa menorahs." You should make a menorah. Doesn't say yet what. We could take every word, every few words, and learn from them. A menorah, says Rashi's klal, a general. There's a general word, a menorah. Then you've got the word zohov. Zohov limits it. Zohov tahar, pure gold. Says Rashi, that's called a prat. Not a generality, it's a detail. What does the detail tell us? I've got a general rule, make a menorah. Make it out of gold. Gold tells me specifically. If I would have just, without having the generality before it, the generality, one of the rules is with a generality and then a detail. The generality tells me what to make, and the detail tells me make it of gold and gold alone. Okay. However, there's another couple of words in that pasuk. Miksha te'oseh. It should be made of beaten something, whatever the item is you're making it of. It's got to be beaten. Well, Gemara says that's another generality. I know it's a description, but there's another verb there. V'osisa menorah zohov, and it doesn't just say miksha, it says miksha te'oseh. Make it of beaten, whatever the material is. Don't have bits and pieces, as we say, and then put them all together, it's got to be of one block of whatever you're utilizing, have one block and form it out of this block. Now, 1 minute. This mixture, it doesn't say a mixture zohov. It said it should be a beaten mixture. It should be beaten, whatever the item is, doesn't tell us. Says the Rashi, choza b'kolal, a further generality. And one of the rules we've got out of Shloisha, the 13 rules of Rabbi Shmuel, that we say just before Baruch She'omar, Rabbi Shmuel Omer, one of them is called klal uprat uklal, a generality, a detail, and then another generality. What's the rule of a klal uprat uklal? We said before, if you had a generality and then a detail, the detail tells me that and that alone is what the item needs to be made of. Okay? So we had the generality, make it menorah, make it of gold, it means gold and gold alone. If you have another generality after it, it's telling us, the generality wants to tell us, you can make it of any other item or material which is similar to the detail. You with me? So the generality is including, that second generality is including further items when you're producing this menorah. Says the Gemara, ma'aprat mefurash shel matzos. Can you actually say, what would you say about gold? You'd say it's a metal. Various ways you could learn that. The Gemara learns that the rule about gold, yes, if it said just gold, it would be gold alone. But now I've got the generality. And the generality is extending that word gold. Although it says gold, it really means other items which are similar to gold. That's the general rule of a klal, a prat, a klal. The final generality will extend that middle word to other items which is similar to it. And this comes up right through the Torah, various halachas. Here's one. So just like the middle, the gold, which is the detail, is a metal, you can therefore have any other item which is a metal, and you can make it out of those two. If that's the case, would you be allowed to make a copper menorah for your own purposes in the same dimensions that the gold menorah would have been? That's the second line of the Gemara. V'shel shiva, if you made 7 branches, lo yaseh afilu shel shamine matches. The Brisa says even if it's of other metals, you cannot make a menorah like that for your own purposes. Why not? Because it would have been kosher. Of course, nicer, more beautiful would be the gold menorah. And of course, that's the one we're all familiar with. But in fact, if they didn't have the gold, and we'll see in a moment, there were occasions where they didn't have gold, it would be kosher with other metal, in which case that's another item you cannot make for yourself. Third line of the Gemara, and we have another rule now. Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda oimer afshel eitz. You can't even make for your own purposes a wooden menorah of the same height, shape, as that used in the Beis Hamikdash, although normally you'd imagine it's gold. You could actually get away with wood as well. That's interesting. I thought we learned before a moment ago, the extension of gold was to metals, but not to wood. Says, why is that? Have a look at Rashi. And this tells us a very important rule here. A machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda Hanossi and Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. They're actually the same generation. As a machlokas, whether you learn klal, uprat, and klal, hope I'm not confusing here, or ribui, sounds like the same. Miut, reducing, ribui, extending, right? When you have words in the Torah, do you regard them as a general rule, a detail and a general rule, or an extension, a reduction, and an extension? Now, it sounds similar words. Look at Rashi, please. Fourth line down. Worth remembering this. Klal u'prata klal versus ribui, miut, ribui. I would have said they're synonyms, aren't they? Says Gemara, no, they're not. Have a look at the fourth line down of Rashi. Av shel eitz lo yaseh. The view of Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda is you cannot make wooden menorah for your own purposes, because you could have been yotze with a wooden menorah. How do you get that out of this pasuk? Says Rashi, shekayotze bo, similar to it, if you've made wood, kashera lifnin, it actually would have been kosher inside the Beis Hamikdash, perhaps not desirable and not the preferred material, but it's still kosher. Why is that? Look at this Rashi. He learns that same pasuk, what's called a ribui and a miut, extending, reducing, extending again. And the rule about a ribui, let's say there are two schools of thought. My Rebbe Kol Mili. Interesting. If you have a ribui, a miut, and a ribui, which means an extension, and that's the word menorah, making a menorah, anything you like. Then it says zov, reducing. Then it's true, it reduces it down to gold and gold alone, but the next ribui extends it out, right out, ribui, miut, ribui, and it means it's only excluding something which is at the extreme end, as far as possible, from this gold. That will be excluded. Metals are all included. Wood is all included. What is the item, the material, which is removed from gold? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Kol Mili Omai Miad, what's been excluded? Cheres, earthenware. That's about as far as you can imagine from gold. So if you have a keli, a vessel made of earthenware, so do you understand the point here? If you learn klal u'prata klal, that's what perhaps we're more familiar with. Klal u'prata klal, the rule is anything which is similar to the middle detail, in this case gold. We look for something, bit like Lewis common multiple type of things, if you remember going back to those days. Look for the common, something common. What's special about gold? If you want to extend it out, you'd say, gold is a metal, okay? Therefore, all metals are mutter too. With me? If, however, you learn ribui, miut, ribui, mishkan, and you're making a menorah, sounds like of everything, then you've got Zahav, just gold, the final comment, which says Mikshah, making something beaten, and it's, in other words, one block. It's coming to include everything else, bar one. And therefore you've got to find something which is as far distance as you can from gold, and in this case you say earthenware, which means the difference between these two views is, what about wood? According to the first view, wood is not permitted. According to the second view, wood will be permitted, but earthenware would never be permitted. So you could make an earthenware, according to the second view, Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, you could make an earthenware menorah, if you wanted to, exactly the same size, same dimensions of that in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, back to our Gemara. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Avshel Eitz Lo Yaser. Why? Because they did make wooden, or certainly you could make wooden mishkan. Not a wooden Mishkan, a wooden menorah. Says Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, I'm going to tell you a time where this actually happened. When did this happen? Fourth line down of the Gemara. Kederech she'osu malchut beis Hashmonai. Wow. At the time of the Hasmoneans, have a look at Rashi. Kederech she'osu malchut beis Hashmonai. In the time of the Malchus kingdom, the realm, the Beis Hashmonai, the Hasmoneans, earlier on this was, have a look at Rashi, Kushe Govra Yodom, She'al Hayavonim, when they were successful, as the word Gibor, against the Yavonim, remember, against the Greeks. And we're talking here of the time of the Maccabees, etc. V'hutzium mirushalayim. They managed to expel the Greeks out of Yerushalayim. V'tiharu es hamikdash. We're talking here about the Hanukkah story. And they were mataher the Beis Hamikdash. They cleansed the Beis Hamikdash. And remember, we all know the story about the oil. V'hoyu aniyim. They were very poor. The great miracle with the oil, but the actual Mishkan that they used, they didn't have a golden menorah. They used on that occasion, says Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda, they used a wooden menorah. That shows and proves my point that the way I'm learning this school, which includes every other item except Kli Cheres, you can see wood is possible. That's my proof. It's a historical fact that they used, or so Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Yehuda says, they used it on that occasion, they used a wooden menorah. Says the Gemara, Omrulai, they said to him, Mishom Raya. That's no proof. Shpudim shel bazen hoyu. There were, in fact, and there's an interesting text coming up here. Shpudim shel bazel. What's shpudim? Like you have a spit, which means you had metal, not necessarily metal, but rods. Shpudim, they were made of bazel, which is a metal. Yeah, iron. They were iron rods. Hoyu v'chipum. Now, they're very interesting. There are different texts here. One of the texts has v'chipum ba'etz, which means rather than ba'bo'atz, which is normally taken as Rashi says, bo'atz means it was made of like tin, but eventually it looks like the color changes, and therefore people imagined it was made of wood, but it wasn't wood at all. It looked as if it was wood. Other people say, if you've got the other text in the Gemara, they actually did cover it with wood, but underneath there was a metal. So don't think that what they had was an absolute wooden menorah. It wasn't wooden at all. Underneath, whether it's wood or tin, and it looked like wood, there actually was metal. So that's the machlokes. Interesting. The machlokes here in actual Metzius, what actually took place? Was it a wooden menorah they had at the time of the Hashmonoim, or was it, yes, overlaid with wood maybe, but in fact there were rods inside made of metal? That's the first or the second view here, whether or not wood was permissible. Says the Gemara, just out of interest, He'eshiru, when they became more wealthy, Aso'um shel kesef. Then, yes, they had a silver. Everybody agrees. Then they had a silver menorah. Chozru ve'eshiru, more wealthy still. Aso'um shel zov. Then they made it of gold. So ultimately they got to gold. The only question was, did they have it of wood or not? And that depends on these two views as to how you learn Pshat in the Pasuk. Does the Pasuk come to include all metals but not wood? Or does it even include wood, but the only item which is excluded is going to be kli cheres, earthenware. However, whichever way you learn, when the Torah says lo sasun iti, or so we think at the moment, don't make things which minister me, which you, that's the point, things that you are making, ministering to me, like this menorah, don't make that item for your own purposes. But there's nothing wrong with having a picture of the sun, the moon, if you want to. So there's no problem about what Rabbi Gamliel did and the pictures he had, the paintings he had up in his attic. Says the Gemara, hold on. And this Gemara actually will go right down to the bottom of the Omud, which we can't conclude today. But let's see how this follows. Says the Gemara, just 1 minute. Are you certain that ministers, if you like, coming for my honor, Hashem's honor, which you can't make yourself, are you telling me that's really permitted? And that's how we understood how Rabbi Gamliel had these pictures of the moon. After the moon is a beautiful object, as we see in Keil Odon, beauty, the beauty of the moon, the sun, the stars, etc. I'm going to give you another example, says the Gemara. V'hotanya, we've got another brisa. Lo sasun iti. There's another brisa which extends this further. Lo sasun iti, lo sasun kidmus shamoshi. Don't make forms of things which are ministering to Hameshamshim lefonai b'moron. Well, that is very clear. It says things which minister to me b'moron, in the heavens, b'moron, which would therefore would sound like it. That brisa, are you disagreeing with that brisa? The brisa seems to extend it not just to items here that you could have made yourself, but even things you can't make. But don't make things that look like those items in Shemayim. Omar Abai, no. It's still okay about the sun and the moon. Why? Omar Abai, Ostra Torah, that doesn't mean that. What it means is things that are ministering to me. Notice it says Bamoro, high up in the sky. What does that mean? It's referring to, people may be familiar with the psukim of Ezekiel, beginning of Ezekiel. So that's a very difficult to understand exactly what's going on in the heavens, above even what we can see, in the sky. It's talking about things in the heavens. And remember that's the Haftorah of the first day Shavuos. Some people say it's very good it's the Haftorah of the first day Shavuos because people are half asleep or more. They're tired and therefore they can't really follow because it's impossible to understand exactly what it means anyway. But whatever happens, we've got psukim there in Yechezkel which tell us and use words of things that are going on in Shemayim. And that's what you mustn't do here. That's what that means. Elo, what mustn't you make for Olam Hazeh? You cannot make something which is the demus of arba ponim. You cannot have a form with 4 sides and 4 faces. Yeah, 4 faces to it, because that's what's mentioned. Whether we understand exactly or not, that's a different point. But we have got a pasuk, which is Chezkel's telling us, which mentions those 4 forms. Do you remember the 4 forms? You've got we can see the pasuk in Yechezkel, talks about a shor, talks about an odom, talks about an aryeh, a lion, and also what is the final one? You've got, of course, a nesher, the eagle. So you cannot make that, says Amai, that's what that pasuk's talking about. It means b'moroim, in the high heavens above what's actually visible by humanity. That's what you mustn't make. Don't make a form and you want it to resemble whatever the Pasuk says with Yechezkel. That's what you mustn't make. Dumus arbo ponim bahade hadodi together. Have a look at Rashi. Dumus arbo ponim. You cannot make something which resembles a four-faced. I've heard people being two-faced, but here we got four-faced item. L'guf echad, with one body, ke'ein chayas hakodesh, which is mentioned in the Pesukim of Yechezkel, the chayas hakodesh. These are ministering angels. Tahainu, that's what iti means. It doesn't mean iti that you can see in the sky. It means things which are really close to me in the heavens above. And all we've got are the Pesukim of Yechezkel, and now we understand that's what it means. So there's an extension. Lo sasun iti means don't make things that you could have made for the Beis Hamikdash. It also means don't make things which are iti with me in the highest levels of the heavens. All we've got are Pesukim in Yechezkel that explain, and we have to take that as the words are said there. That's what you mustn't make. So just 1 minute. Hold on. One final for today, one final question. Says the Gemara Elamiato. What would you say about making a human form alone? Is that permitted? Are you allowed to have, this is very interesting actually, and we'll have to see the halacha when we finally get there. What about having a statue, a human statue? Is that permitted? Interesting. Elamiato partsuf odom luchudei, human face, tishtari. According to what we've just learned, we said only things which are with me in Shomayim. We've got a posuk in Yechezkel which tell us the four faces, the four sides. But what happens if you had just one side, the human form, which is mentioned as one of the four, but it's in Shomayim, it seems, it's four-faced, not just one. Aloma Tanya, there's another brisa, says the Gemara. Kol ha-patzufos mutorim. You can have forms, a form of anything you like, chutz mi-patzuf odom. So it's just an additional question. Why did you say only four sides when there's a brisa which says you cannot have the form of a human? That's also forbidden. Have a look at Rashi. Parts of Adam L'chudei Tishri. According to what you just learned, that we take the pasuk from Yechezkel, says Rashi, Shari hu echod mehen. It's only one of the four bachayas among these ministering angels. Nevertheless, you said Omato Ika Kulu Bahadi Hadodi. You need all four of them together. But there's a brisa which says you cannot have just a human form. You cannot make a human form for yourself. Answers the Gemara, Omar Rav Huna Berei de Rav Idi, Mi Pirkei de Abaya. And from the lessons of Abaya, Shemirli, I heard an answer to this question too. Do you remember the Torah, as we know, without vowels? There are various ways you can read the words. Of course, there's only one way, which is the correct way to lane it in shul, but for lessons and limudim, there's various ways you can learn the psukim, the words. Now, the posuk says, Lo sasun iti. But if you take the vowels away, under the aleph, tov, yud, you could read, Lo sasun oisi. Don't make me. What does it mean, don't make me? Now, if you can bring up, please, Peter, this Gemara, particularly I'm looking on the side with Rabbeinu Hananel. And while Peter does this, we'll talk about Rabbeinu Hananel. Remember Rabbeinu Hananel from Karawan? I don't know if anybody been down Karawan. He was the Robin Karawan. Oh, thank you very much. We want this page, which is the Chof Dalad Omid base. So yes, it's the one on the left. If you can bring that in this, that's right, a little bit further up good, very good. There's your pasuk. For number one, we've got number one there, Lo Sarsun Iti. But take away the vowels, you could read that, Lo Sarsun Oisi, don't make me. Now, what does that mean? Follow this down, please, to Rabbi Hananel, right at the edge. And if you could just scroll up a bit for us. Or, I don't know which way you want. That's it, spot on. And we're now going to have the Pirush of Rabbeinu Hananel, because then Rashi doesn't tell us here what it means, don't make me. What do you mean, don't make me? What's that going to do with the human? Says Rabbeinu Hananel, as I say, he died, I think the year they talk about is 1055. So he died just after Rashi's born. And we do say the Rabbeinu Hananel is normally the introduction of the Rishonim after the time of the Gaonim. His Rebbe was Rabbi Haigom on the last of the Gaonim, moving from the Gaonic period to the Rishonim. That's Rabbeinu Hananel. His most famous pupil was the Rif, who we mentioned on various occasions, Rabbeinu Al-Fassi. But this is Rabbeinu Hananel. Look at his Pirush here. If you go back to Lo Sarsun Iti, Pirush Lo Sarsun Oisi. So the Gemara's learning, you cannot make, on top of what we said before, you also cannot make just a human form. Now, how do you get that Lo Sarsun Oisi? What's human form got to do with Hashem? Pirush. Lo Sarsun Oisi Kagoin Demus Odom. Why? Sha'ani Mare Linevim Bechez Yonom. How do I often appear to the prophets when they have their visions? K'nechsev b'Yechezkel, as it says, next line, Yechezkel, Demus Kamare Odom Olov Milmalo. That's what it means. That pasuk says that when God often appeared to the prophets, he appeared in a human form. That's what this means. Lo Sarsun Oisi, don't make the form in which I appear to the prophets. Yeah? Thank you very much, Peter. So with that, we've now, what are we therefore saying? We've got the following limud. Let's just summarize where we're up to. The Gemara is going to ask further questions on this. Where are we up to? The Mishnah said the Rabbi Gamliel had dumus, forms of the moon. The Gemara asks, you can't do that. Because the Pasuk says, Lo Sarsun Iti, don't make things which minister to me. So first of all, we said, no, that only things that you make. Don't make things which you would have made in my honor. Don't make them not in my honor. Well, of course, the moon you can't make. Says the Gemara, we can extend that further. There's another brisa. It says, Lo Sarsun Iti, don't make those things which are with me. That's extending that lesson, not just don't make things which you would have made for me. Don't make things which actually are with me. Sounds like minister to me in heaven. We answered that and we said, no, this was talking very specifically about those things that minister in the, if you like, the upper echelons, the upper heavens. And where there we've got this pasuk in Yechezkel, we're talking about an item which has 4 faces to it. That's mentioned by Yechezkel. Then the Gemara said, just 1 minute. I've got another pasuk which says, if you're telling me it's only 4-sided, why, if it's just human, is it going to be forbidden then? That's got nothing to do, it's only one of the sides. Says the Gemara, Lo Sarsun, you can read that word without the vowels, and of course that's one of the ways of learning pshat and extra halachas. Lo Sarsun Oisi, there's an additional halacha not to make a form which is resembles the way I appear to the prophets. And therefore, so far, all those things are forbidden, but what is going to be permitted is going to be pictures of the moon. So with that, we're at the stage now. I suppose we should stop here because the Gemara will ask for keep this going. And the next piece will take us a bit longer to go. So we will stop there. And at this point, wish you all well. Of course, for those people in Israel, we are in a different parsha to our friends in Chutz La'aretz. We are already in Parshas Bahar, and where you're actually in Parshas Emor. And the question we've once asked before is, why are we different at the moment? Now, of course, we know why we're different, because in Eretz Israel, the last day of Yom Tov was Friday. Shabbos was already Shabbos, which was not Yom Tov. Where in Eretz Israel, where in Chutz La'aretz, the last day of Yom Tov was on the Shabbos. However, the question is the following. We've asked this question before. Why in Chutz La'aretz did they not lay Acharei Mos Kedoshim together? And they would have caught up. You laid Acharei Mos, Chutz La'aretz are laying Acharei Mos Kedoshim as separate sedras. If they would have laid them both together, and in Eretz Yisrael laying them separately, we would have caught up, or Chutz La'aretz would be the same as Eretz Yisrael. Remember, we've asked this question before. I think Benji in particular. I think we discussed this. Why don't we
about the Sedra before Shavuos? Isn't it to do with the Sedra before Shavuos?
Well done, very good indeed. They're absolutely right. Before Shavuos, we want to have B'chukoisai, but we just want. In other words, it's like the Tochacha. Before you get to Kabbalah Satori, you have the Tochacha, or some warnings before receiving the Torah. But we don't want to go straight from there into Shavuos, so we have a gap, what's called a gap week, not the gap year. It's a gap week between the Tochacha of B'chukoisai and it's preferred at least to have a gap of just 1 week in between. Now, in Eretz Yisrael, there's nothing we can do. There'll have to be 2 weeks in between because there's no space. We're ahead of it. So we've actually got 2 sedras in between. Noso as well will be in between. But if Chutz La'aretz doesn't have to do that, it would be very nice. And that's why they keep that situation, that they have Acharei Mos Kedoshim were not together, so that there will only be, as Murphy mentioned, just one parsha between B'chukoisai until you get to Shavuos. But you've still got a question. Some noise in. There's still a question. The question is, what's wrong with Chukas Bolok? Which you could catch up there. Why do you leave it to Matos Masa? It's miles away. And the answer is, many people say, it's desirable to try and get Pinchos in the 3 weeks. Parshas Pinchos in the 3 weeks. If in Parshas Pinchos you've got all the korbanos, which sadly we don't have today. And therefore, if you have Matos Maseh together, your weeks, the 3 weeks will be Pinchos, Matos Maseh, and Devarim. With me? Whereas if you have Matos Maseh separately, what would you have now? Matos, Maseh, Devarim. Devarim is always before Tisha B'Av. You don't want to have, although it's huge, Matos Maseh, those 2 sedras together. Anybody who's got a mitzvah Matos Maseh is it's a tough going. The longest of all of Matos Maseh, you would have thought it would have been preferable to divide that, have a Matos Maseh rather than other sedras earlier. No. Matos Maseh together, because that way you'll have Pinchos, Matos Maseh, and Devarim before Tisha B'Av. Yeah, so that's why. You will have that in Chutz La'aretz.
When would these decisions have been made? When would these decisions have been made?
At the time when they divided up the Sedrus and they're laning in a year, the Gemara, we learned that Gemara actually in Megillah. It goes through all the rules. So it's back Talmudic times. When they're laning, of course, if you're laning the 3-year cycle, is rather different. But once you're into the 1-year cycle, you've got these rules already mentioned in the Gemara and Megillah. So
they would have had that whole debate at the time, and then
they would have. Yes, definitely about what's meant to happen. So it's not that we're trying to keep Chutz La'aretz and Eretz Yisrael apart. No, everybody, Kol Yisrael Chaverim and our Kol Yisrael our Ravim Zelazeh. We're all in this together. Klal Yisrael, as we know, one Klal Yisrael. However, in Chutz La'aretz, they can still manage to get Pinchas in the 3 weeks. In Eretz Yisrael, you can't. There's no room. There are no sedras available. Everything is separate from now on. And it will go right through until you get to Matos Maseh. So here in Eretz Yisrael, there will be Matos, Maseh, Devarim, all those in the 3 weeks. Sadly, I wouldn't say sadly, you won't have Pinchas in the 3 weeks, but you can do that in Chutz La'aretz. The only question is those people traveling from one way to the other and missing or doubling up. So
in the 3-year cycle.
Yes.
So there would have been no rhyme or reason to the timing.
No. So how you just divide up in 3 years. So that's all right. You obviously divide up much further than we've got now.
How long did that go on for? I mean, that minhag.
It talks about it. The tour talks about it. So it must have gone on for quite some while. So the tour mentions a 3-year cycle, and some places doing it. And, of course, the sedras are that much shorter, but then you don't finish the whole, as you know, obviously in a year.
But you're saying that our custom really goes back to Talmudic times. There must have already been the disagreement, the two minhagim.
Yes, you've got the 2 minhagim already. Yes, absolutely. But yeah,
did it follow along Babylonian and Yerushalmi lines or not, or was it? I mean, how to
look at that? It's mentioned in the tour. When you've got the end of Hilchos Rosh Chodesh, it goes through.
Sadly, I don't have one available here in my room.
You're joking? In Rosh Pinah, there's no tour.
There certainly isn't in Rosh Pinah. There might be in Sfat.
But, Rosh Pinah, I must give you some addresses there.
Yeah, please don't.
Okay, please don't. Okay. Yeah. So you're right. I mean, I think they talk about it in Babylonian times. You've still got the 3-year cycle. Perhaps we can talk about that more, but certainly in the 1-year cycle, then I'm afraid there will be a difference right up to as long as possible, basically, right up to Tisha B'Av until or just before. So yeah, those people traveling back. So Mervyn, when you're going back, or you're not?
About 2 weeks. Well. Yes, I am good. I promise.
So you're or actually we have Sylvania. I think I'm not sure it's here. Sylvania. Those people going back then will get the Sedra, of course, twice. So Mervyn, something to look forward to. Okay. Yeah. On that note, we wish you all well. Have a very good week. We're good to see Sam there as well.
Amen.